Geoff, it's an interesting counter-argument, and the reason why it's interesting is because the Petroleum Industry Act in Section 317 specifically states in 7 to 8 of that Section 317 that where the domestic refiner has proven its capacity to supply the Nigerian market with the actual consumption volumes that it needs based on the empirical data provided by the mid and downstream regulator, the regulator has the legal obligation based on the PIA, right, to review the import licenses that has been given for people to bring in products into Nigeria. So, Geoff, you see, I'll approach this conversation from a very balanced perspective. So if the importers, for example, are arguing that they have a right to bring in products to, stop monopoly, for example, just for example, hypothetically, which I don't think is the case, because there are other refineries in Nigeria that are refining crude, even if most of them don't have a catalytic reforming unit to be able to reform it into premium motor spirit and other transportation fuels. If, for example, that is the argument, the question we should ask is, does the regulator, NMDPRA, do they have labs at the ports of entry based on the regulatory gazette provided from the PIA, specifying that the regulator is supposed to have a lab that takes samples of products when the vessel is approaching the ports to test for distillation level, for diesel, to test for flash points, to test for cloud points, to test for octane rating, motor and research octane number, to test for sulfur content. Because in the petroleum industry, okay, Geoff, the price is determined by the quality of the product. Do they have a lab? The results, the certificates of quality that they bandy around, if you subject it to a forensic audit, will it pass muster, or are those results forged? This is the question we have to ask ourselves, because, Geoff, there's empirical evidence, there's airtight evidence to show that what is happening today is that Togo, which is one of Nigeria's neighbors on the western flank, has a floating storage offloading vessel of 2 million metric tons or 2.6 billion liters of throughput that holds products and that blends products. And where does most of this product come from? It comes from Russia. Geoff, let me take you back so you understand, you get a perspective of this issue. In 2022, Russia attacked Ukraine, and because Russia attacked Ukraine, Russia was placed on a sanctions list, right? Russia was removed from the global SWIFT system that has about 13,000 banks in it with headquarters in Belgium, which means that Russian banks cannot open LC for their customers to be either import or export products. The G7 went further and sanctioned Russian oil and gas and placed a cap. Initially, they placed that cap at $60. Then they now moved the cap to $45, which means that officially on paper, Russia cannot sell its crude oil above $45. Now, let me tell you what Nigerian traders, in collaboration with international traders, are doing. They go to Russia, they go to ports in Primorsk, Novorossiysk, they buy crude, they buy mazout condensate, they go to Kazakhstan, they buy crude from Kazakhstan, they blend the crude oil feedstock, they refine it to naphtha. Naphtha is the first base compound you get when you start refining crude oil. They refine it to naphtha, but naphtha is not fit for consumption. Then they use C5 resins to blend it, which was what NNPC was doing at his refinery in Elemi that he claimed was working. In fact, Farouk went to that refinery, took a sample of that product in a bottle, and said that it was working. And then the same Farouk came out and put in a report that the refinery is shut down this year, after the government spent $30 billion it borrowed with Nigeria's crude oil. Now, they bring this reform it, they bring it to Lomé, they blend it with C5 resins, they bring those products into Nigeria. Those products are not tested. Now, if you test those products, you realize that the sulfur level for most of those products are over 800 parts per million for sulfur. The octane level sometimes is very low, which is the reason why Nigerians will notice that their petrol, when they burn it, it doesn't last for long. It doesn't last like it usually should last, number one. It's also the reason why they always have issues with their engines, right? So it beggars belief that you have a regulator who is not fair in his dealing, who is not complying and obeying the PIA, who is not following what the PIA says. Because in 2020, the ECOWAS came together and said they are going to agree on an harmonized sulfur level for petrol that is sold in the Economic Committee of West African States, of which Nigeria is a member, and they capped that sulfur level at 50 parts per million. If we, and I've said this over time, I've said this for over a year, Geoff, if we organize a third-party Robin roundtable and bring the regulator together, bring an external auditor, bring all the players together, put a sample of their product, will it pass muster and will it comply with what the PIA says on the standards that are met? The only person who is obeying the PIA is Dangote. Dangote is the one who has invested, who is obeying the PIA, who has reached and crossed Nigeria's actual daily consumption volume. But the regulator has been frustrating his efforts to provide these products to Nigerians.